You know, it's really nice to see Superman take a page out of Batman's book in terms of animation movies, because I think it worked out pretty damn well. Superman vs. the Elite is the fourth installment in the DC universe of animated film lineups, and it stars George Newbern to reprise his role as Superman. Although I'm really not sure who does it better between him or Tim Daly. I think depending on the story itself, I don't know, one Superman can work better than the other in terms of the situation of the actual plot, but in this case, I think he actually did a pretty solid job as Superman. Now, the plot to Superman vs. the Elite starts off with this. The Atomic Skull starts at the beginning of this movie killing a bunch of civilians, after which Superman is questioned by the UN if whether or not Superman not being willing to step over the line and kill people is such a good thing. Because it's called into question that if Superman had killed the Atomic Skull before, instead of locking him up, perhaps these civilians would still be alive. Shortly after, a team of superhumans appears somewhere in, I believe, the Middle East, and they seem to be just like Superman, except they're willing to kill. Now, when the civilians actually see this, that they are willing to kill, and therefore ensure that this threat will never ever harm anyone again, Superman begins to question himself if whether or not humanity really should stay the way it is, in terms of we shouldn't kill people just because we want to, and we should abide the law and do justly, or should they move on and actually have villains actually be killed, therefore they can never harm anyone again. And it really pushes Superman to really have to consider crossing the line to prove a point to both himself and the civilians of Earth. Now, I would just like to go into it that this is a very, very good animated film. I wouldn't necessarily say it's as good as other ones, say Doomsday, but I think it's a close second. Now, what truly makes Superman vs. the Elite really good is Superman himself, in that he actually has to go through somewhat of a change and question his own morals that he has really been taught. And it's really something that also Batman has done, which is why Batman and Superman are my two favorite superhero characters of all time. They both have to question of whether or not their rule of not killing is the best thing, because constantly throughout many forms of their comic book stories, every time they have put away a villain, they know that that villain will break out and kill more civilians, and then they are questioned or criticized and stated that if they had just killed this person to begin with, then these civilians would have survived. And I think it's taken to a much further level in this particular movie. I would say that the first half of this movie is relatively slow and things really don't tend to pick up, but the third act of this movie is by far the best part, and you actually get to see a side of Superman which you don't really see much in the comic books, but it's pretty scary to see exactly what Superman would be like if he had crossed that line, just like in the Justice League episode of Otherworld where he killed Lex Luthor and then they become the Justice Lords, and that version of Superman is willing to kill. However, as great as this movie is, it does have a couple little flaws that make it stand out and not quite get us to the level of ultimate greatness. For one, although you can see by this picture here that Superman is kind of drawn really well, but trust me, in the actual movie, he's drawn a lot more, say, cartoony, and he just looks a little bit too puffy. If you get a chance to see this, you'll know what I'm talking about. And I also don't really like how each one of the elite members' backstory isn't a little bit deeper. There's only particularly one scene where Lois actually talks about the individual backstories of each character, and I just felt that they didn't go deep enough into them. However, even with that, Superman vs. the Elite is a very solid movie, and I think that any fan of DC or Superman should definitely check this out. I would give Superman vs. the Elite a solid 9 out of 10. It's a very good film and a great collection to the DC animated film lineup. If you like this review, please like, comment down below, and subscribe at the top to keep track of me. And like always, I will see you next time.